Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Moving into the Future. Today, I am joined by Bob Knakal from JLL. Bob, how are you today?
I'm great, Jack, and it's great to be with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. For our listeners who are not familiar, Bob is one of, if not the most successful real estate professionals in New York City history. He's had over $20 billion in sales and has been a part of over 2,000 real estate investment deals. Is that correct?
2,272 as of last week.
Wow. And that's changed since about a month ago, because on the Weiss advice, I believe he mentioned 2,259.
That's right.
So yeah,
Good stretch here.
yeah, that's incredible. So I'm really excited to have a conversation with you. This all started because we were at the Red Connect networking event back in June, I believe it was, or early July. And you had done something that really piqued my interest, because what's currently going on in Manhattan is rents are rising at an astronomical pace for a lot of residents. And people often place that blame on the landlords. But when in fact, a lot of it has to do with state and local governments and some of the roadblocks that they put in place for developers and investors. And I know you've done some work to try to, advise local governments and state governments. And, can you talk a little bit more about that as far as some of the advice you've given them and how you think, we can improve that moving forward so rents can become more affordable for the residents of New York, and, we see more, whether it's affordable housing or just housing opportunities that are in large luxury buildings.
Yeah, Jack, I think it's one of the big ironies of New York real estate is that, public policy and the way the markets function are very, very highly correlated. In fact, sometimes in some sectors, like the multifamily sector, the correlation with public policy is greater than the dynamics within the market itself. And what I mean by that is that, there are policies and restrictions, rent regulation. There are things that guide what property owners can do. So you mentioned, and owners are asking for big rent increases. The fact is they couldn't ask for those if the market wouldn't bear those increases. So, if you ask for an outrageous amount and nobody's willing to pay it, you're not going to ask for that outrageous amount. But the fact is that, and the irony is, every single politician in New York says that they want rents to be lower, they want the city to be more affordable for people, but yet every single piece of legislation that has either been implemented or ignored since 2018 has done nothing but exerted upward pressure on rents. And when I meet with politicians, I tell them, look, if you want to solve New York's housing issues, it's very, very simple. Just look at the supply side of the equation. And what politicians opt to do is to try to confiscate private property, restrict private property, restrict what property owners can do with their property, rather than increase supply, which is a much easier thing to do. And the tangential benefits of increasing that supply is that you're creating a tremendous number of jobs, you're increasing tax revenue, you're lowering rents. But there's nothing bad about increasing supply, and the easy way to do that is to incentivize construction. We have no 421A tax abatement or Affordable New York, which was a follow-up iteration of 421A. That abatement's gone. So there is a huge air bubble in the supply pipeline of new rental housing. No new rental housing being built. In fact, sellers who come to us that have sites that could be developed for rental housing, we tell them, don't even think about selling because your property value is so low because there's no abatement in place. Don't sell today.
See, that's really interesting. And again, with the state of the market and what it is in commercial real estate right now, where this is something else interesting that you told me, with seeing so much available commercial real estate, and we have a lot of, so much space. It's a lot more than many cities have total in commercial real estate right now. And you think what could be happening is these buildings get sold and then, could be knocked down, but the incentive to build residential properties there simply doesn't exist, is what you're saying?
Well, the issue you're talking about is conversion of office space to residential, and that's been a big topic. The fact is that we could very easily have 100 million square feet of vacant office space in the city. We went into the pandemic with 25 million feet vacant. There's currently 27.5 million feet under construction. And if aggregate demand for office goes down by just 10%, that could be another 40 or 50 million feet. There's 100 million feet. A lot of the office stock in New York City is functionally obsolete because of the age. And the office sector, to understand it fully, you have to look at new construction Class A versus everything else. New construction Class A is doing well. And the interesting thing is, if you're in a new office building, you feel like you're in a completely different environment than if you're in an older building.
Without a doubt.
So I think that the sector is doing well. The older stuff, there's only so much you can do to an older building.
Right.
You can't change ceiling heights. You can't take columns out. And so it's difficult for those buildings to be competitive with new construction. So what we've told elected officials is that, we think that they should incentivize the conversion of this older, obsolete office stock to residential. The values are falling. They haven't fallen quite to the point where it's feasible to do the conversion. And there are some being done. But in the 2000s, in post 9/11, and the 421G tax abatement program was in existence before 9/11, but really kicked in after 9/11. At that time, we had about 1,800 dwelling units in the financial district. Today, there's almost 30,000, all created by this 421G tax abatement program. So I've told the governor, I've told other people, I think that there should be a citywide 421G to incentivize the conversion of this obsolete office space into residential. Further, I think values are falling to the point where if you take the cost of the building and then look at a $75 or $100 a foot demolition cost, your aggregate cost is below land value. So I think there's a chance that a lot of these older, obsolete buildings will be demolished to make way for new construction. But we need to incentivize the conversion of these buildings to housing. We need housing desperately. It would be great for the housing market. It also would be good for the office market because we'd eliminate a lot of that overhang of vacant office space. So there's nothing but good things that come out of that. And that's another thing that could be done to increase supply. Another issue, which I think is really, really important, that not a lot of folks are talking about, is the MCI and the IAI programs. And for those, I know you have a lot of listeners from around the country. I'll explain what those programs are, but I'm a lifelong diehard Yankee fan, and I remember watching the World Series in 1977, and Reggie's hitting all the home runs, and the Goodyear blimp is panning out over Yankee Stadium. There's 6 fires going on within 3 blocks, and that was happening because at the time it made more sense for folks to burn their building down, get the insurance messed in it. Right. So the city smartly enacted a major capital improvement program, MCI, and the individual apartment improvement program, the IAI, to incentivize the private sector to invest in their buildings rather than burn them down. So we had in 1977, the dilapidation rate in New York was 14%, meaning 14% of all housing units were deemed uninhabitable. So the IAI and the MCI kick in. The private sector invests tens of billions of dollars into the housing stock. And in 2019, the dilapidation rate in New York was 0.04%.
Which is incredible.
And so what happened, our rent laws changed very tangibly in June of 2019 and marginalized both of those programs to the point where we have tens of thousands of apartments that were previously rent stabilized that are sitting vacant. And that is something that could easily add to the supply of units. Also, I told elected officials, you restore the IAI and the MCI, you'd have 40,000, 50,000, 80,000 units that would all be under construction within 2 weeks. And then that would create jobs, and create economic activity. It would increase tax revenue, and you'd have more apartments for folks. I mean, so many of these ideas are so simple, but yet our politicians can't get their arms around these issues and are choosing to confiscate private property rather than increase supply. So if they would just focus on the supply side and look no further, if those policymakers believe that an Econ 101 textbook is capitalist propaganda, look no further than the pandemic.
Right.
You had a lot of people move out of the city.
Right.
The vacancy went way up. Vacancy going up is effectively adding to supply, and rents in Manhattan dropped by 30%. So you want rents to be more affordable, simply create more supply and rents don't drop.
And so when you were saying too, so because they eliminated the MCI and you said ICI? IAI. Because they eliminated that, there are 40,000 vacant units in New York City that could easily be rented to people.
Yeah, well, they couldn't easily be rented unless they're renovated. See, the issue is, let's say somebody was living in an apartment, a 2-bedroom, and they're paying $750 a month. Well, they've been there for 40 years. Right. That building that unit is probably in terrible shape. It needs a new kitchen, new bath, new walls, new floors, new windows, new everything. In the old guidelines, you were able to fully renovate that unit and pass along 1/40th of the increase of what you spent in monthly rent.
Right.
Today, you can't do that. So if that unit, let's say on a free market basis after it's renovated, is worth $4,000 a month, and the last tenant was paying $700 a month, if you go in and renovate the unit today, you're capped at investing only $15,000 into the apartment over a 10-year period. So no owner is going to take that unit that's worth $4,000 a month,
right,
renovate it, and then rent it only for $758 a month, which is what you'd be able to do. You effectively be creating a life estate for that tenant. They would never move out.
Exactly.
So why would you do that? So the estimates are, the low estimates I've seen are 20 to 30,000 units. The high estimates are 70 to 80,000 units. Probably, 40, 50, 60,000 units that are sitting empty. What the heck are you thinking about?
Man, that is something else. And again, you said it's simple economics. By just increasing the supply, so many more people. And one of the things too, you mentioned about the office sector and how it would help the commercial sector and office sector as well. One of the many reasons why people don't come back to the office too is because they have to commute. And when you have an easier commute living in the city, you're going to see a more robust city with people and walking, and not to say tourism and that aspect hasn't come back, because it certainly has. But when you're talking about the affordability of the city, which pushes people out, like we said, to the outer boroughs or into New Jersey or Long Island or upstate, it becomes much more of a challenge, if you will, for them to come into the city, to get to the office 4 to 5 days a week, and they'll only come in when needed. And again, that hurts the city, that hurts the local economy, and it starts from the top there. So let this be a message to the people of New York City and beyond. Many people always blame these landlords for these issues, and I'm sure you speak to a lot of landlords too. What do you talk about with them, as far as their property goes, and what are some of the things they say to you and the positions that they're in?
Yeah, well, I think most landlords who own apartment buildings in New York, probably the adjective that best describes them is they're very frustrated.
Yeah.
They've owned their buildings for a long time. They love their tenants. They love the neighborhood. They want to keep the buildings up. Have some owners that plant flowers every year, and they really want to create a nice environment for their tenants. And they're saying, Bob, I can't do that stuff anymore because I can't afford to.
Right.
And the restrictions and the obligations that owners have get more and more burdensome every year. But the increases in rents that they're able to get don't keep up with inflation, don't keep up with the increase in taxes. Or a real estate tax burden on apartment buildings is overwhelming. When I started in the business in 1984, real estate taxes as a percentage of gross revenue in the buildings was about 5 or 6%. Today it's 30%. Some buildings, even 33, 34. We've seen 35% in some buildings. Where is that burden going to go?
Right.
They're going to get to 50%?
Right.
So, it's very, very cumbersome. Owners are frustrated. They're unable to keep their buildings up. And interestingly, probably 85 to 90% on the what we'll call the old timers, the families and the individuals who for decades would only buy New York City apartment buildings. They wouldn't even go to New Jersey. They only bought in New York City. 85 to 90% of those people are buying around the country now.
Yeah.
They're not looking at anything in New York. They're buying in Florida and Texas and Tennessee and the states where state income taxes are less than 3%. And we have a bunch of new people who are coming in, who are buying these buildings, because for my entire career, cap rates on New York City apartment buildings were always 150 to 200 basis points below where they were around the country. Today, cap rates in New York are higher than they are outside New York, which is really, it's troubling to see. It's creating a dynamic where people are selling in their home states, coming into New York. They don't have a vested interest in the neighborhood.
Right.
They don't really know the neighborhoods. And not saying that that's a bad thing, but somebody who knows the neighborhood, cares about the neighborhood, wants to see the neighborhood continue to thrive is better than someone who's just looking to make an investment and a return.
Exactly. And, come for a couple weekends a year sort of thing. And, whether they're renting it out and Airbnb or whatever it may be, those people really don't become a part of the community, which is, again, something you want to try to avoid, which is unfortunate. And, one of the things I wanted to talk about too, and you mentioned it now, people come to you often for different real estate advice and different advisement, information, ideas you can give them or specific market insight that you can provide. What do you think? I actually saw this as one of your Knakal nuggets, which I really enjoy on Twitter and LinkedIn. And one of the things you mentioned is, when somebody asks you about the market, come prepared to give them, specific numbers or a dense proposition and value that you can provide to them. So you're not just saying, okay, the market is bad, or, yeah, it's really something right now.
The lesson is to talk in statistics rather than adjectives.
And that's something you're very good at. That is I've listened to a number of your podcasts. You've been doing a bit of a tour, and I appreciate you coming on mine. But one of the things you said is real estate is not a very difficult thing to grasp. It's numbers, and it's analyzing, the values of properties. We have the map room where, you have the entire island of Manhattan laid out there and understanding. And I think that's something you've done very well, is simplified real estate. So then by hand, you simplify it for your clients. Is that something you do well?
Well, it's interesting, Jack. I think real estate, it's summed up by my buddy Kyle Matthews very well. And he says, real estate is a simple business. It's just really hard. and it makes total sense.
I get it.
I mean, it's not we're not curing cancer here.
Right.
It is a very straightforward blocking and tackling kind of business, but it's hard to have the discipline to do these things day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And that seems to be one of the characteristics that separates the folks who do really, really well in our business from the folks who don't do that well. And it's passion, discipline, a number of things. Mm-hmm. But, I think understanding the real estate is really, really important. Understanding what's the total size of the market, what's the turnover rate, what are the prices, what are the cap rates, to be able to articulate what's happening with numbers as opposed to adjectives is a huge differentiator within our business.
Absolutely. Because as you mentioned, I think, again, this was in the Knakal Nuggets. It was like the market is down like 45% this year or something to that effect. And, how does that compare to year over year? What was that like pre-pandemic? What were numbers like? And understanding that and be able to give that context to clients is so important. And that's similar in what I do as well. What we're doing a lot of right now, you mentioned people moving out of the state or looking for investments out of the state. I move a lot of furniture out of New York City to different markets around the country into Canada and Mexico. And one of the things clients ask me is, what is this going to cost? And, they think of it just from the shipping aspect of things, but it's also, the disassembling of all the furniture, the reassembling, and to give them that context and understanding. We're not just looking at one component here. We're looking at multiples. And then say if they wanted to buy new too, well, they're going to look at the price tag, just for that new furniture. But then they have to also think of the delivery cost, the installation cost on all of that, the time frames and those
And see, Jack, what you're talking about though is you're framing everything on a relative basis,
Right.
and that is so important, and that's why the numbers and statistics matter so much. If I tell you that the market is on pace this year in New York City for $14 billion in sales, that number doesn't really tell you anything,
Right.
right? But if you know that, last year the volume was 32 billion, it puts it in perspective. If I tell you that at the peak of the market, there was 80.1 billion in 2015, then you start to get a sense of what that number means. So numbers are important on a relative basis.
Right.
And so when we look at the numbers, we're trying to look up, is activity going up or is it going down? Is the dollar volume up or down? Are the number of properties sold up or down? Are values up or down? And then you want to get two things, direction and magnitude. And the only way you get direction and magnitude is by comparing one number with a set of other numbers. And that's the beauty of statistics, is that the absolute numbers themselves don't really tell you anything, right? If you have, I know nothing about the real estate market in Kansas City. If you told me there were $2 billion in sales this year, I have no idea how to interpret that.
Right.
But if I know that last year there were 500 million in sales and you're on pace for 2 billion this year, I say, wow, that market's booming. If you tell me last year was 10 billion, I'm like, oh my God, the market is really suffering. So it's all relative perspective, and that's why numbers are so impactful. But you have to have a perspective and a set of numbers, and then you can analyze what any one particular number means.
Exactly. And one of the things too that very well, and I've understood this about you just from the little time I've known you, you've been studying these numbers since about 1980 in Manhattan. Is that correct?
1984.
1984. And then the numbers really don't go back farther than that. You really can't find much more because they didn't start keeping real estate records until about the 80s, right?
Well, it's interesting. This is now the fourth major correction.
Right. That's how I was like, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I was around the S&L crisis in the early 90s and the recession of the early 2000s, the GFC, and in trying to look at where this correction fits in relative to those, I really wanted to do a comparison of what this current period is like relative to what the city was like in the 70s, because we have fiscal problems within the city that I think could rival what happened in the 70s. And I wanted to get real estate data, and I went all over the place. The Real Estate Board of New York, talked to a bunch of old-timers, and that data just doesn't exist anywhere. It's really interesting. And, I'm sure some people have it, but it's in analog form. Nothing's been digitized, and so there was no way to get a handle on what that information was. But, yeah, I think my affinity for statistics started as a young kid. I played baseball my whole life through college, and collecting baseball cards is a big hobby around it. And how always loved looking more at the back of the card than the front of the card. I loved to look at the statistics that people had, and I think that made me keep track of my statistics as a kid in Little League. And then as soon as I started in real estate, I started really focusing on the numbers and trying to get a sense of what was happening in the market based on how the numbers had fluctuated.
Yeah, exactly. And you see, it's funny, those small things that we do when we're young and, those interests we take, and now it's led you to being one of the most, successful real estate professionals ever. Speaking of the Yankees too, you mentioned it before. You're a Yankees fan, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Tough season, huh?
Tough season. I have to say, I am a very, very New York sports minded.
Right.
I'm a diehard, lifelong Yankee fan, but will always want to see the Mets do well.
Same.
I am a lifelong diehard New York Giants fan, but want to see the Jets do well. I'm a lifelong diehard Ranger fan. I've had season tickets since
Still
1984,
over the Islanders?
and I want to see the Islanders and the Devils lose every game.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
That's the nature of hockey versus other sports.
Right, and I've always explained this to my friends. So, again, I'm a diehard Knicks fan, and I can't stand the Nets. But with the Yankees and the Mets, the Yankees play in the American League, the Nets play in the National League. They only see each other a couple times a year, and then if they do see each other in the World Series, you obviously pull for the Yankees. Right. The Jets and the Giants are the same thing. The Jets, yes, right. So they only see each other a couple times. The Islanders and the Nets, they're division rivals, so there is something there. We got to beat them in order to make the playoffs and succeed. So it's a different type of competition there. But I understand that, and I know you're a big hockey fan too. You met a great Ranger like last week, I saw, right? Who was that?
Oh, Eddie Giacomin.
Yeah, retired number one.
Great Ranger, great, but there have been a number over the years, and Mark Messier is one of my heroes. Look up to him very much, and met Mark several times. But hockey is a big thing in my family. I have a 14-year-old daughter. She plays ice hockey.
Nice.
We travel to go to hockey. We actually travel quite a bit, and we'll go to a city and see a hockey game on Saturday night, and then go to a football game on Sunday. And it's been a great bonding thing for our family.
Yeah, that's very cool. And one of the things you were involved in, which we also have a connection to, is Hockey in Harlem, which is a non-for-profit that provides, hockey opportunities to young men and women in Harlem to learn hockey and play. And you were the president of that organization for a while?
I actually got involved in ice hockey in Harlem in the late 80s, and I was asked to join the board. It actually is an after-school program for kids to help them with their educational advancement, and then they get to play hockey. We use hockey as kind of the hook to get the kids into our after-school classes to become better educated. But they also get to learn to play hockey, which is great because most of these kids wouldn't have the opportunity to play hockey. And then I actually served as the president of ice hockey in Harlem for 15 years, which was a tremendously rewarding thing for me.
Yeah, my little brother, so I'm a big brother through big brother, big sister, and he used to live in Harlem right near Central Park, where I think a lot of it took place. And he was into it he had to be like 10 or 11 at the time, but he loved it. He had a great time with it. And, it was a cool new skill. He loved sports. So, for him to get to learn how to skate and play hockey was a real joy for him. So, yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, we were active at Lasker Rink and Riverbank, and the kids absolutely loved it.
Right, because that's the thing with a sport like hockey, too. See, I grew up playing basketball. You mentioned baseball. With basketball, all you need is a ball and a hoop. Baseball, you can still get swings in, with a bat and a ball. With hockey, a lot of equipment involved, a lot of different pieces that you need. So the fact that you guys provide that to that neighborhood and those kids, is a great opportunity. Do you know of any kids that ever went on to, play more or anything like that?
No, I think there were a couple of kids that did go on to play in college.
Yeah.
Which was great. And, the Rangers have been great supporters of the program. You mentioned all the equipment that's needed. We had so many great companies and individuals that provided donations of equipment for us. And, one of the great things about nonprofit organizations in New York is that they're so giving and provide such great services to folks that really need a hand. And, it was a great experience. It's a great charity. It's still not as involved as I used to be, but still a big fan and big supporter of ice hockey in Harlem.
Yeah, and that's great. And what you mentioned there, too, as far as the communities, I think when you're involved in real estate, getting involved in different communities and understanding those communities helps a lot with what you do and, how your knowledge of those neighborhoods and who are the people who are accessing these different spaces. It adds a lot more depth to that. So,
we always thought it was important to give back. Our core values at MK were passion, integrity, excellence, and responsibility. The responsibility component dealt with giving back to the communities in which we work. And I remember when we opened up our Harlem division, none of the major brokerage companies were active in Harlem. Not that we were a major brokerage company, we were a little popcorn stand, but we sold more buildings than anybody else was White Park.
That's right.
But we were very, very active in Harlem. We were selling a lot of properties up there. Felt it was important to get involved in the community. We were involved in many charities up there. Shimon Shakuri, who now runs Ariel Properties, opened up that division for us and really led the charge there. But all of our folks that work up in the area were actively involved, giving their time to charities that were focused in Harlem, and it was a great experience for us.
Yeah, that is great, and this has been a really great time talking with you. One of the things when I was preparing to sit down with you, I go over a lot of things in my head. When you talk about being a great advisor, one of the things I really try to do is always come prepared. And, I did some research on some of the other podcasts you went on. And when we talked the first time, you mentioned you're a big Seinfeld fan. And to bring the Seinfeld trivia, and I saw on the Weiss Advice episode, you nailed those questions. And they weren't easy. So as we finish up here, I got a few for you. I wrote out on the phone. We'll see how good you are. These are tough, and these are a few of my favorite episodes.
All right.
So let me get them ready here.
Great show. As a New Yorker, you have to love Seinfeld.
Oh, you got, and especially when I've been here 10 years. So now you're from New Jersey, or are you from the state?
I grew up in Maywood, New Jersey.
Right.
Bergen County. And then went to school in Philly, and then lived at home in Maywood for about 6-9 months, and then moved into the city. So I've been living in New York in Manhattan for 39 years.
Right. And that was the same case for me. That's what I was getting at is, I grew up in upstate New York, and I was living at home for like 6 months, and I realized I can't be spending my 20s in the town I grew up in. So I ended up down here. And funny story about that too. We were talking about the Jets before. I interned for the Jets. They're on Hard Knocks this year. The last time they were on Hard Knocks was at City Cortland, where I went to school. And I interned for them there. And a recruiter reached out to me. She asked if I'd be interested in working in the city. I said, of course I would be. But I told her, I was like, but I live upstate New York. She's like, oh, we're looking for people, who live in the tri-state area. I was like, no. I'd be interested in finding me a job. And I've been down here 10 years. And when I first got down here, I got really into Seinfeld because it helped me, I felt like, assimilate to New York City and like learn about it and, the different things. And a couple of these questions actually have to do with New York icons and the city at whole. So we'll start with this one. In season 3, episode 1, titled "The Note," who does Kramer see eating a donut, and what is the donut shop called?
Okay, well, Kramer said he saw Joe DiMaggio eating a donut at Dinky Donuts. And one of the things that Kramer claimed was that Joe dunked his donuts.
That's right.
And Jerry was shocked that Joe DiMaggio would dunk his donuts.
Right. And this is why it's funnier at the end of the episode, because the other subplot of that episode is George gets a massage from a male and is very uncomfortable with that. And they're sitting at the table at the end of the episode, and they all see Joe DiMaggio eating a donut. And Joe goes, man, that's one handsome man.
Well, that's it.
And they look at him. Oh, I get a kick out of that one. Okay, here's another one. In season 4, episode 14, titled "The Movie," the crew agrees to go see a movie together, but they all arrive at different times. What movie are they going to see? And a bonus question, what is the other movie that George walks into because he can't find Elaine?
Oh, this is a tough one.
I know.
I had to say, there's so many movies mentioned on Seinfeld. It could be The Channel.
No. Close.
Oh, okay. Close. So let me think. George goes in, and does George walk into Rochelle?
He walks into Rochelle. He originally we were going to see him.
It wasn't Firestorm. That was another episode. Oh, this is a good question, Jack. Let me think. It's not Plan 9 from Outer Space. That was another one that they mentioned.
They go to the movies a lot.
They go to the movies a lot. They talk about the movies a lot. I'll
give you another hint.
Okay.
So Kramer walks in, and he sits in Elaine's seat.
Sits on Elaine's coat.
Right, exactly. I thought that might refresh your memory quickly. Jerry was late to the movie because he was doing a stand-up set with, I forget the guy's name, but he comes late. You got to guess? You were close with the tunnel.
It's on the tip of my tongue, but I don't know it.
This is a fitting answer. Check me.
Checked me. Okay.
Yes. All right. Oh, wow. I feel good about that.
There you go. Great question for anybody.
Thank you. And then last one in season 6, episode 9, titled "The Secretary." What is George's secretary's name? Remember?
Oh God,
Redhead.
the redhead. I remember it.
Gives her a raise.
Mr. Costanza, and she ends up making more than
Right.
when he's not involved for the Yankees.
Right.
I think you got me on that one too.
Man, it's Ada. And then Jerry too. He's at the dry cleaners, and that's another situation at the movies where the dry cleaner really likes his jacket, and then his
Helms to his coat.
That's right. That was going to be the bonus question.
And Jerry actually knew that the dry cleaner took the jacket to the movies because he found the ticket stub in the pocket of the jacket.
Exactly, and then he couldn't get his mother's ticket stub back because he gave that ticket stub to Kramer to get whose number?
To get Uma Thurman's.
That's right.
And the reason that he couldn't call Uma was because he had some moisturizer in his pocket, and he then somehow Kenny Banya ended up with the stub, but the moisturizer obliterated the number that Kramer had gotten for Uma Thurman.
Right, that's exactly right. Well, Bob, thank you so much for coming on. This was great. This is great. Yeah, it was informative. It was fun. I really appreciate the time. Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely, Jack. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening.